California consumes more fuel than most countries. But what happens when that supply suddenly tightens? Imagine pulling into a gas station and seeing prices jump overnight. Or worse, stations running dry. It sounds extreme, but recent trends suggest the system is under serious pressure. Experts are warning that a perfect storm of declining supply, rising demand, and policy shifts is quietly building. And most people don't even see it coming. Now here's the unsettling part. California isn't just any state. If it were a country, it would rank among the world's largest economies. So when energy problems hit here, the effects don't stay local. They ripple outward, from higher transportation costs to rising prices on everyday goods. This situation could impact millions far beyond state borders. So what's really going on behind the scenes? In this video, we'll uncover 10 shocking reasons why this oil crisis is unfolding and what it could mean for your future. Number 1. Declining local oil production. Here's where the problem quietly begins. California's own oil supply is shrinking. For decades, the state relied on its local oil fields to meet a large portion of its energy needs. But today, many of those fields are aging, drying up, or producing far less than before. This isn't a sudden collapse. It's a slow, steady decline that has been building over years. And the dangerous part? Most people don't even notice it happening. Think of it like a well that used to flow freely, but now only drips. Even with advanced technology, extracting oil from older fields becomes more expensive and less efficient over time. Companies are forced to invest more money just to get less oil, which naturally discourages production. And when production drops, supply tightens. And when supply tightens, prices almost always rise. It's a chain reaction that directly hits everyday people. Now here's the bigger issue. California hasn't replaced this lost production fast enough. Instead of boosting local output, the state is becoming increasingly dependent on external sources. That means less control, more vulnerability, and a higher risk of sudden disruptions. If something goes wrong globally, California feels it immediately. So what does this mean for you? It means this isn't just a temporary spike or a short-term issue. This is a long-term structural decline in local energy supply. And unless something changes, the pressure will only continue to build slowly, quietly, until it becomes impossible to ignore. Number 2. Strict environmental policies. Now let's talk about one of the most debated factors behind this situation, California's strict environmental policies. The state is known for leading the way in climate action, pushing aggressive goals to reduce emissions and transition toward cleaner energy. On the surface, this sounds like a positive step, and in many ways it is. Cleaner air, reduced pollution, and long-term sustainability are all important. But there's another side to the story that often gets overlooked. These regulations have made it increasingly difficult and expensive for oil companies to operate. Permits take longer, compliance costs are higher, and new drilling projects face heavy restrictions. As a result, many companies are either scaling back operations or choosing to leave the state altogether. And when producers exit the market, the supply naturally shrinks. Here's where the tension builds. Demand hasn't dropped at the same pace. People are still driving. Industries still rely on fuel, and daily life continues to depend on oil. So what happens when supply is restricted but demand stays strong? Prices rise, sometimes sharply. It's a classic imbalance, but in this case, it's being driven by policy decisions. Now think about this from a real-life perspective. You might support cleaner energy, and many people do, but at the same time, you're paying more at the pump, more for groceries, and more for transportation. That's the trade-off people are beginning to feel. The big question is, can California balance environmental goals without creating an energy squeeze? Because right now, the gap between ambition and reality is becoming more visible and more costly. What do you think? Are these policies helping or hurting the situation? Drop your opinion below. I'm genuinely curious to hear your take. And if you appreciate the effort behind these deep dives, hit subscribe. It's just one click, but it keeps us going. Number 3. Refinery shutdowns. Here's a part of the crisis many people overlook. Even when oil exists, it still needs to be refined before you can use it. And in California, that critical step is quietly shrinking. Over the past few years, several refineries have either shut down, reduced capacity, or shifted to alternative fuels. On paper, it may not sound dramatic, but in reality, this creates a serious bottleneck in the entire energy system. Think of refineries as the heart of fuel production. Crude oil is useless until it's processed into gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. Now imagine that heart slowly losing its strength. Even if oil is available, fewer refineries mean less fuel gets produced. And when production drops, shortages can appear faster than expected, especially during high-demand seasons. What makes this even more concerning is that California has a unique fuel blend requirement, meaning it can't easily import gasoline from other regions. So when local refineries go offline, there's no quick backup plan. The system becomes fragile, almost like a house of cards, where one disruption can trigger widespread effects. From a real-world perspective, this is why you might suddenly see sharp price spikes or limited supply at gas stations. It's not always about a lack of oil. It's about a lack of processing capacity. And rebuilding or replacing refineries isn't something that happens overnight. It takes years, massive investment, and stable policies. So the big issue here isn't just supply, it's infrastructure. And right now, that infrastructure is slowly shrinking, making the entire system more vulnerable with each passing year. Number 4, dependence on imported oil. Now here's where things start getting even more fragile. California no longer controls its own energy destiny like it used to. As local production declines and refineries struggle, the state is becoming increasingly dependent on imported oil from other regions and countries. And while that may sound like a simple solution, it actually introduces a whole new layer of risk. Think about it this way. When you rely on others for something essential, you lose control over stability. California now depends on oil shipments that travel thousands of miles across oceans. These shipments are affected by global conflicts, shipping delays, political tensions, and even extreme weather conditions. One disruption anywhere along that chain can instantly impact supply back home. And here's the scary part. It doesn't take a massive crisis to cause problems. Even small delays or reduced shipments can lead to tight supply and sudden price spikes. That's because the system is already under pressure. There's very little room for error. From a viewer's perspective, this means your daily fuel costs are no longer just influenced by local factors. They're tied to global events happening far away. A conflict in another part of the world, a delay at a major shipping route, even policy changes in exporting countries. All of it can hit your wallet without warning. So while importing oil helps fill the gap, it also makes California more vulnerable than ever before. Instead of solving the problem, it shifts the risk elsewhere. And sometimes that risk comes back even stronger. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think relying on imported oil is a smart move or a risky gamble? Drop your opinion below. We put a lot of effort into bringing you these insights, so don't forget to subscribe. It's just one click, but means a lot. Number 5, rising demand despite the green push. Here's something that surprises a lot of people. Despite all the talk about electric vehicles and clean energy, oil demand in California hasn't disappeared. In fact, it remains strong and deeply rooted in everyday life. Millions of people still rely on gasoline-powered cars. Trucks move goods across cities, and industries depend on fuel to keep running. So while the state is pushing toward a greener future, the present reality tells a very different story. This creates a dangerous imbalance. On one side, supply is shrinking due to production declines, refinery issues, and strict regulations. On the other side, demand is not falling fast enough to match that drop. And when supply and demand fall out of sync, the result is almost always the same: higher prices and increased pressure on the system. Think about your own routine. Whether it's commuting to work, ordering products online, or even traveling, oil is still quietly powering much of it. The transition to electric vehicles is happening, but it's slower than expected. Not everyone can afford an EV. Charging infrastructure isn't fully built out, and many people simply aren't ready to switch yet. So we're stuck in a situation where the old system is being phased out, but the new system isn't fully ready to take over. This gap creates uncertainty, and that uncertainty drives instability. The key takeaway? Until demand truly drops or alternatives fully scale, this mismatch between shrinking supply and steady demand will continue to fuel the crisis, making it more intense and harder to control over time. Number 6. Energy transition gaps. This is where things get even more complicated. California is in the middle of a massive energy transition, but the shift isn't happening as smoothly as expected. The goal is clear: move away from fossil fuels and toward cleaner, renewable sources like solar and wind. But the reality? That transition is far from complete, and the gap in between is creating serious pressure. Right now, we're stuck between two systems. The old system, oil and gas, is being reduced. The new system, renewables, is still growing but not yet strong enough to fully replace it. And this in-between phase is where the instability lives. It's like trying to replace the engine of a car while it's still moving. You can't stop, but you also don't have a fully working replacement yet. Renewable energy comes with its own challenges. Solar and wind are not constant. They depend on weather conditions. Storage technology, like batteries, is improving but still not enough to handle large-scale demand consistently. So when renewable output drops, the system still leans on traditional fuels, but those are now limited. For everyday people, this creates unpredictable outcomes. You might see fluctuating energy prices, sudden shortages, or increased reliance on backup systems. And until the new infrastructure is fully built and reliable, this gap will continue to create tension in the system. The key issue here isn't the transition itself, it's the timing and execution. Moving too fast without a solid backup can strain the system, while moving too slowly delays progress. And right now, California is trying to balance both with mixed results. What's your take? Are we moving too fast or not fast enough? Share your thoughts below. I read every comment. And if you value the effort behind these videos, hit subscribe. It's one click, but it helps us keep going. Number 7. High operating costs. Now let's talk about a factor that quietly pushes everything upward. The cost of doing business in California is extremely high. From strict regulations to labor expenses and environmental compliance, operating an oil-related business here is far more expensive than in many other regions. And when costs rise for companies, those costs don't just disappear, they get passed down to you. Think about it like this. If it costs more to produce, refine, and transport fuel, the final price at the pump is going to reflect that. Companies have to cover expenses, and in a high-cost environment, that means higher fuel prices become almost unavoidable. Over time, this discourages investment. Some companies reduce operations, while others leave entirely, shrinking supply even further. Here's where the problem deepens. California isn't just dealing with high costs, it's competing with other regions where operating is cheaper and easier. So naturally, businesses shift their focus elsewhere. This leads to less local production, fewer refineries, and reduced infrastructure investment. And once that capacity is lost, it's incredibly difficult and expensive to rebuild. From a real-life perspective, this impacts more than just gas prices. Higher fuel costs affect transportation, food prices, delivery services, and even everyday essentials. It becomes a ripple effect that touches nearly every part of daily life. So while policies and regulations aim to achieve long-term benefits, the immediate reality is clear. Higher operating costs are tightening supply and driving prices upward. And unless those costs are balanced or reduced, the pressure on the system will continue to grow, making the situation even more challenging for both businesses and consumers. Number 8. Supply chain disruptions. Now let's look at a factor that often hits without warning: supply chain disruptions. Even if oil is available and refineries are running, getting fuel from one place to another is a complex process. It involves ships, ports, pipelines, and trucking networks all working together. And when even one part of that chain breaks down, the entire system can feel the impact almost instantly. California is especially vulnerable here because much of its oil comes from overseas or distant regions. That means long shipping routes across oceans, where delays can happen due to weather conditions, port congestion, labor shortages, or geopolitical tensions. A single delay at a major port can slow down deliveries for days or even weeks. Now imagine this. Everything is already running on a tight balance, and suddenly shipments arrive late. Supply tightens quickly, and before you know it, prices start rising. It doesn't take a massive global crisis. Sometimes even minor disruptions can create major ripple effects when the system has little room to absorb shocks. From a real-world perspective, this explains why fuel prices can feel unpredictable. One week things seem stable, and the next week prices jump with no clear explanation. Behind the scenes, it's often these hidden supply chain issues causing the fluctuation. The bigger concern is that these disruptions are becoming more frequent in today's interconnected world. With global trade under constant pressure, California's reliance on long supply chains makes it more exposed than ever. So while the problem may not always be visible, it's always there, quietly influencing supply, pricing, and stability in ways most people never realize. Have you ever noticed sudden price jumps and wondered why? Drop your thoughts below. I'd love to hear your perspective. We put serious effort into uncovering these insights. So hit subscribe. It's just one click, but it means everything to us. Number 9. Policy uncertainty. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough, but plays a huge role behind the scenes: policy uncertainty. In simple terms, it means the rules keep changing, and that makes it very difficult for companies to plan for the future. In California, energy policies are evolving rapidly, with new regulations, targets, and restrictions being introduced frequently. While these changes aim to push toward a cleaner future, they also create uncertainty for businesses operating in the energy sector. Think about it from a company's perspective. Building or upgrading energy infrastructure, like refineries or pipelines, requires massive investments and long-term planning. But if the rules might change in a few years or even months, companies become hesitant. Why invest billions if future policies could make those investments unprofitable or even unusable? This hesitation leads to a slowdown in new projects and upgrades. And when investment slows, infrastructure doesn't grow, or worse, it begins to decline. Over time, this reduces capacity, tightens supply, and increases the risk of shortages. For everyday people, the impact isn't always obvious at first, but eventually, it shows up in the form of higher prices, limited supply, and fewer options. It's like a domino effect. Uncertainty at the top leads to instability throughout the system. The key issue here isn't just strict policies, it's the lack of consistency and predictability. Businesses need a stable environment to operate efficiently. Without that, the entire system becomes fragile. So while the goal may be progress, the path to get there needs clarity. Because without clear direction, uncertainty itself becomes a major driver of the crisis. Number 10. Long-term energy strategy risks. Now let's step back and look at the bigger picture. The long-term energy strategy itself carries serious risks if not managed carefully. California has set ambitious goals to move away from fossil fuels and lead the world in clean energy. On paper, it sounds visionary, but in reality, the speed and execution of this strategy can create unintended consequences if the foundation isn't fully ready. The challenge lies in how fast the transition is happening compared to how prepared the system actually is. Shutting down traditional energy sources before fully replacing them with reliable alternatives creates a gap, and that gap can lead to instability. It's not just about having renewable energy, it's about having consistent, scalable, and dependable energy that works 24/7. Right now, there's a risk of building a future system while gradually weakening the current one, without a strong bridge connecting the two. And when that balance isn't right, the result can be price volatility, supply stress, and increased uncertainty. From a real-life perspective, this affects more than just fuel. It influences electricity reliability, transportation costs, and even economic stability. If the strategy doesn't account for real-world demand and timing, everyday people end up facing the consequences. The key takeaway here is simple. Ambition must be matched with execution. Big goals are important, but without a stable and realistic transition plan, those goals can create pressure instead of progress. So the real question is, can California successfully navigate this long-term shift without triggering deeper disruptions? Because the answer to that will shape not just the state's future, but possibly set an example for the rest of the world. Now I want your honest opinion. Do you think this long-term strategy is bold or risky? Drop your thoughts below and join the conversation. We put a lot of effort into bringing you these insights. So hit subscribe. It's just one click, but it truly helps us grow. So when you step back and connect all the dots, a clear picture begins to form. This isn't just about oil. It's about a complex system under pressure. From declining local production and refinery shutdowns to rising demand and global dependencies, every piece is adding weight to the same problem. And when multiple stress points hit at once, the system doesn't just bend, it starts to strain. What makes this situation even more intense is that it's happening during a major transition. California is trying to move toward a cleaner future while still relying heavily on the current energy system. That creates a fragile balance, one where any disruption, no matter how small, can trigger bigger consequences. And as we've seen, those consequences often show up in ways people feel immediately, like higher fuel prices, increased living costs, and economic pressure. But here's the important part. This isn't just California's story. It's a glimpse into what could happen anywhere attempting a rapid energy shift without fully prepared infrastructure. In many ways, California is becoming a real-time case study for the rest of the world. So where does this leave us? It means the future of energy isn't just about innovation. It's about timing, balance, and execution. The decisions made today will shape what the next decade looks like, not just for one state, but potentially for millions of people beyond it. And now the question turns to you. As this situation continues to unfold, are we witnessing a temporary challenge or the beginning of a much bigger global shift?